Hey everybody, it's Mark Patterson. I'm back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming excuse me, all about people overcoming adversity and making their way through it and finding their summit. Anyways, I haven't done this in a little bit during the summer here, but we're back on track. And before we get into today's wonderful guest, we're going to talk about my website really quickly, www.markpattersonnfl.com. There's a number of things going on there. Number one, the movie Searching for the Summit, which won an Emmy for Best Picture, covering my Everest journey by the NFL, is now on that website. You can check it out by following the different links that are there. That's number one. Number two, I've got over 260 podcasts of Finding Your Summit with amazing people like the guy on today doing incredible things, which will inspire all. And number three, I continue to have my hands knee deep in my philanthropy causes with Higher Ground. That's an organization that helps process all these things and drive money and awareness to people who really need it. A lot of these people are military folks who've had PTSD and have had adaptive issues with their legs and arms and things like that. So really about empowerment. My daughter also has epilepsy. So we created this campaign called Amelia's Everest, and we have now raised well over 100 grand towards these great causes. So if you want to donate over there, go ahead. 100% of all the money goes directly to Higher Ground. Okay, on that note, let's jump into today's great guest. His name is Tom House. Tom, how you doing?
Very good. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday to you. I haven't done this in a spell in about a month, and so I got tongue twisted just a little bit. And I normally don't do that, but it's all good. So I found you, like a lot of times I do, at some certain point, the delta of knowing people and then tapping into other people, or you hear about somebody. And I was so fascinated because they've called you this guru, quote unquote. I don't know how you'd exactly phrase that up, but I kind of want to give away what we're going to talk about a little bit later, and then to kind of go back and see how the building blocks of how you actually got to the place that you're in today. Tom is a guy that I saw, I think, on Twitter, and you've been somewhat infamous, if that's the right word, for helping guys like Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, many other NFL stars, Drew Brees over the years, with their throwing motion and helping them get better. And the interesting thing about all this is that you're really a baseball guy, and you're a guy that went to USC, went on. You were drafted by the Braves, played over the Red Sox, my home team, I guess, so to speak, the Mariners. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, went to the University of Washington. So I'm sure you know that area well up there. But let's go back to kind of the root, the beginning of formulating, because so much of what you do is just not about how to throw a ball. To me, all mechanics are roughly the same when throwing anything, whether it's a baseball, a football, a basketball. It's all that follow through, shoulders square to target, and off you go. But there's so much more that you do, that you contribute to this, which is between the years of making that happen. So let's start kind of back at USC and your love for baseball, and how did that kind of evolve to where you are today?
Mark, that's a great lead in, and you've done your homework. It's awesome to talk to somebody that has any kind of clue that what I've been doing for the last 50 years. But we'll go back to SC. It actually started sooner than that with my mom and dad, and they're not quantifying or qualifying sports as a way to make a living. They only cared about getting an education. So everything I did in sports, I had to get an A to be able to play. So that set the stage. But when I got to USC, my first bullpen was next to a guy named Tom Seaver. I had a really good high school career, and my first bullpen at USC with Coach Rod Dato, who was the coach of the century, watching over my shoulder and Seaver's shoulder. I was looking at this guy. He was a man child at 18, 19 years old, and I'm flipping up my little left-handed 80-mile-an-hour fastball, and he's running it up there, a 95, 96 in a bullpen. And Coach Dato was the first one to make me aware that there were options outside of pure talent. He said, "Well, what do you think of young Tom Seaver, Tommy House?" And I said, "Rod, if you need me to do what he's doing, you got the wrong left-hander." And this is where I've been fortunate my whole life. when it comes to someone mentoring me at the right time at a crossroad. He said, I don't need you to be Tom Seaver. I need you to be the best Tommy House you can be. Throw your curveball, throw your changeup, field your position, hold runners close. You'll get innings. You'll win a lot of games for the Trojans, and you'll play some pro ball too.
Gabe,
So,
let me jump in really quickly because you're telling me this whole story, and the thing that I'm recollecting, again, going back to Seattle, watching the Seattle Mariners, especially when they had Griffey and Rodriguez and those guys up there, but
yeah.
a pitcher named Jamie Moyer, and you sound just like him, right? Lefty, could throw probably tops 85 miles per hour, and
Well,
had
you're aware that I had Jamie for 6 years when I was a pitching coach for the Texas Rangers.
well, there you go.
And he ended up having a longer career. He pitched till he was 48. Nolan Ryan only pitched till he was 47. But it was the same information and instruction delivered to a particularly different human being. But the process created a better chance for an outcome, a positive outcome with both of them.
Okay, so
So,
let's talk about that process because it's you I think you used yourself and Tom Seaver, who I think played for the Dodgers way back when. And then you're talking about Nolan Ryan and Jamie Moyer, right? Nolan Ryan
right.
was just like a pissy, you know, burning fire out of his nose, throwing 100-mile-per-hour fastballs well into, like you said, his late 40s. And then you have Jamie Meyer, probably very similar to you, a lefty that would just throw
Right.
these floaters coming in and strike people out left and right.
Right. Well, you talk about individuals, whether they're coaches or athletes, reaching a summit or getting really good with mastery at what they do. It's really finding order in chaos with some kind of a process. We cannot, what I learned early on, we cannot control outcome, but we can control process. And by hook or by crook, throughout my playing career and my coaching career, I got lucky in learning how to manage the process that I was going through and not getting so caught up in outcomes.
Okay,
And then,
so go back there though. I'm so fascinated in this because if you can appreciate, going through major college football with the process, going into the NFL with the process. I was kind of like Tom Brady, another guy that you mentored. I was drafted in the seventh round. He was drafted in the sixth round. Had to fight for
right,
everything. Obviously, Tom Brady is a legendary player. I wasn't, but still, we all try to achieve our ceiling of what we were able to do, and then going on and climbing all these crazy mountains around the world. That took a process. I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I got into it. And then, coming back and helping to revive Sports Illustrated, there was a certain process. And so
yes.
I'm trying to understand from you, like, I really want to peel back the layer here and not just glaze over it like, oh, there's a process. Well, what does that mean? Like, to you, in your mind, what is that process? What's that combined of?
Well, it's unique to each individual. Like there's one set of rules, but there's a million interpretations, and it's a function of his movement efficiencies, his functional strength, his mental emotional capacity, and his nutrition and sleep to recover. Those are the four basic pillars of health and performance in any sports occupation. And again, I played, but I continued to get education. I went on and got a couple of Bachelor of Science, a couple of Masters, and a PhD. An avid learner and just listening to you talk, you may not have realized it was formal, but you're an avid learner, or you would not have been able to do the climbing you did on the seven summits of the highest mountain ranges in the world. And it's the individual, and he doesn't have to be a leader. He can actually follow someone that identifies for himself or herself the path of least resistance, the process that will return the most, give the best return for the least. Occam's razor, let the best return for the least amount of thinking or processing. So what I got lucky at is, as a player, I was always in front of somebody that gave me a how-to with my talent and how a process to make it work. There were Clyde Kings of the world where he realized I didn't throw hard, but he saw that my ERA, when I was in the minor leagues, one time through the lineup, my ERA was less than 2. By the third time through the lineup, it was astronomical. So he was a statistics guy before anybody even knew what they were. He put me in the bullpen and said, I'm going to get you to go one time through the lineup 3 or 4 times a week. And I was in the big leagues the next year. Do you see how lucky I got? So what and this is exciting for me, for you to ask me to tell you what the process was. The best process I can tell you is ask why and make sure it's something that will get you through the now. What happened yesterday and what's happening in 2 days doesn't matter at all. What only matters is today. And I learned early on that we, through experience, knowledge, and wisdom, gain more from our failures than we do our successes. So I never looked at my screw ups as something that was a really bad thing. I treated it as a learning experience, and I think that allowed me to not get caught up on the outcome of throwing hard or winning every game, or the things you can't control, but to actually deal with and manage the things you can control. Did that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah, and let me spit back at you on my end, like the way I used to see things, okay, which is very similar. And so I've always encouraged people, well, especially myself, and this is, I think, part of my success, is when you really tap into the power of curiosity. And so that's that same thing that you were just talking about. And it's asking that why, and taking the time out. Like, when I first lined up against Lester Hayes, the guy with all the stigma on his uniform and everything. And this was the guy I went against every single day in practice, for 3 years.
Right.
And, the guy was a beast. And the question was like, how was I going to get off the line against this gigantic guy? And I learned how to do it because I kept asking myself, what is he thinking? Put myself in his position, and how would he be positioned, body alignment, all that kind of stuff on how these things are going to work. Same thing with climbing these crazy mountains, Mount Everest. Like, how does this actually work? I've watched 5,000 reels on YouTube of people climbing up the mountain. So I literally memorized it through visualization of what the mountain, what I was going to encounter. Now, did that make it any easier? No, it was still hard work, but at least I was starting to set my mind with expectations on what was possible.
Mark, that's perfect. You were playing the game before the game. And what that allows you to do when you're actually playing the real game, you've already been there. Even if it wasn't quite right in your pregame visualization, it gives you a head start on the people that are trying to process immediately when it's happening. So in listening to you talk, these are things that I find common amongst all high achievers. And remember, high achievement is relative. You take a person that only has the talent to play basketball in high school and ends up getting his college degree on a scholarship in basketball because he's just a grunt and grind guy that was never the best, but always good enough to make the team. That guy, in his own way, was a Hall of Famer unto his own talent. Not all of us can be the best of the best, but you can always be the best you that you can be.
Yeah, no, I get, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Another thing I just want to drop, and I've talked about this before, one of the things that really helped me really create the foundation of my different successes, like there's no magic to it, right? It's hard work at the end of the day. But Don James, my Hall of Fame coach at the University of Washington many years ago, you probably remember him from maybe the time that you played up in Seattle with the Mariners. But the net is he had taken the whole pyramid of success from
John Wooden.
John Wooden, and he made it his own. And I've tried to explain this to people before, and that the person that exemplifies this the most, and the guy that we'll talk about here in just a few minutes, is Tom Brady. And at the very top of the pyramid, it's all about competitive greatness, and it's really about being the best when your best is required. But really, the bottom line is that it takes hard work and it takes many years to get through these things. And if you don't love that process, if you don't love killing yourself, going up and down that mountain like I did, I moved to Sun Valley, Idaho. I go up and down a mountain every single flipping day. I'll go up this afternoon, and constantly at it. But yeah, I'm doing it. I know I have to, and I want to, but because I love it. It's the
But you have
passion.
you have the passion for it. That's
That's right.
exactly right.
And so that's like the magic sauce, which gets and so going back to a guy that you've tutored. I'm like I look at Tom Brady, and I love watching him, his process, and because he's an old guy, trying to continually get better. And he seems like he already has so many of these different skill sets, like you're talking about, like the way he processes things and chases things down, and he's competitive, but he also prepares.
Right.
And I'm wondering, like, how in the universe does Tom House and Tom Brady come together? Because Tom is in his brain somewhere, he's saying to himself, there's still areas of improvement that I need to make, and I want to see if this guy can help untap some of those things.
That's a great question, and there's actually a very simple answer to that. Um, these elite guys, these elite quarterbacks you're talking about in the NFL, the fraternity is really a small fraternity.
Yeah.
And when they stumble across something that helps an individual, they share. And a lot of the agents have the same clients. Well, my first go around with an NFL quarterback when it was full time was with Drew Brees. But the football thing started about 10, maybe 12 years earlier when I was coaching in the minor leagues with the San Diego Padres. The big league trainer with the Padres had the pitchers throw footballs for post game and pre game getting loose conditioning, because you can't throw a football wrong, make it spiral.
All right.
And it's a little heavier. It's 3 times as heavy as a baseball, so there was some strength training involved. So when I saw that, I started taking a football wherever I went as a pitching coach. And as luck would have it, Cam Cameron was the offensive coordinator with the San Diego Chargers when Drew Brees signed with the Chargers.
Long time ago.
And he said basically, and I'd worked with Cam's kids in baseball, and he said, I see you throw a football. I've got a quarterback that could probably use your help for a little mental, emotional, and maybe some recovery. I think his mechanics are pretty good, but maybe you could help him with his functional strength. So he made the introduction, and I actually got a chance to work with Drew for almost 2 years before he blew his shoulder out. I don't know if you remember.
I do.
The last game of his competitive season, when he was supposed to sign a free agent contract with the Chargers, blew his shoulder out, went back to Dr. Andrews. Dr. Andrews put it back together, but he called me and said, I don't think Drew's ever going to throw a football again. Well, 7 months later, he's starting with the Saints and actually doing a pretty good job. And that, the rest of that is history. But with Drew's success, people kind of ask, well, what brought you back? What are you doing with your conditioning? I see you doing all this weird stuff. He said, well, it's crazy Tom House. And so Drew made a couple of introductions, made a couple of introductions, and pretty soon we're working with 28 of the top 32 NFL quarterbacks. And it was not well thought out, but it was organic, and it was what I would call authentic, and it's just taken off from there. And Socrates said it best. He felt like he learned more from his students than they learned from him. And I'm still going on with that. I learn more from quarterbacks when I'm working with them than they get from me. But it must be enough for them to keep going back. And you said it, it's not exactly mechanics. It's all four. It's mechanics, functional strength, mental, emotional, processing under stress, and then nutrition and sleep for recovery. And the reason that Brady is so durable and still producing, we had learned how to do that with Nolan Ryan and Jamie Moyer when I was with the Rangers. And we know for a fact there's no reason that you can't do at 45 what you did at 25 if you're committed to your process. And of all the athletes that I've worked with in the NFL, Brady at 45 just had his birthday last week. is still trying to get 1% better every day. Even though he's got mastery, even though there's probably no one in the game that has more between his ears on how to manage a game than he does, he's still looking for a way to get better every day.
That's great. I love that. And really that should apply to everybody in life. There's an interesting movie that came out a while ago. There's a guy named Jake Burton who was really the inventor and the founder of snowboarding way back when. I think he grew up in Michigan or someplace, and there's a small hill, and he just had a plank of wood and nailed some tennis shoes into it and slipped into it and went down a hill, and that was kind of the first snowboard. And so this movie is about his life, and it's really fascinating on the different competitors and how he stayed ahead of the game and how he opened markets in Europe and all this stuff. And then it really blew up into this Olympic sport now. And so with all that he accomplished, he's now my age, 60 at the time. And somebody said, Jake, man, you've accomplished so much. Why don't you just slow down? And he said, dude, you got it all wrong. Now's the time to accelerate. Why don't you catch up? And yeah. I feel like that's certainly the way I live my life. But and unfortunately, Jake Burton died of cancer, but some years ago. But Tom just seems to be on that same path. Like there's more opportunities than ever before that I've had, way more than certainly when he got drafted out of Michigan.
Without a doubt. And what you just said is exactly right. He's been able to match his mental emotional makeup with all the new technology, all the old school. He's got the benefit of what it boils down to: experience, knowledge, and wisdom. He sees things that nobody else sees because he's had more experience and taken on more knowledge. And the wisdom of him being able to connect is he has the imagination of a 4-year-old with the wisdom of a 45-year-old. So it works out really good for him. His toughest thing is going to be, what does he do when he retires? Mm-hmm. He had a little bit of that this summer when he
saw it, yeah.
And he lasted, about 2 months before he realized that he still had passion for the game. Yeah. And literally wanted to stay with it. So we'll see how that goes. But every time we talk, he's an avid learner, and in his window of trainability, which is skill retention, there's nobody that works harder to retain the skills that he does have.
So let's say that I'm Tom Brady, or I'm one of your stable of quarterbacks that's come to you over time. For you, and I want to just break down the mental part, because I think what this podcast to me is all about is taking similarities and traits that you've been able to work with high performers. You see this all the time with like a guy like Tony Robbins, who works for these high executives, and there's certain traits. And so how do those become transferable to somebody who isn't Tom Brady, but maybe aspires to be great at whatever their chosen field is?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's relative to the individual. And what I'm most proud of about my path and where we're going with the really smart people I'm working with, there are 4 windows of trainability, and they're age specific. There are 4 windows of learnability, and they're age specific. When you put those 2 together, it kind of gives you a roadmap on how this youngster or oldster should be approached with his needs to make him better than he is when he walks into your environment. And I think we talked at the beginning, you and I talked about how lucky I was to get exposed to the technology and be able to take advantage of it. So we were the first ones to do high-speed motion analysis. We could actually see at 1,000 frames a second what quarterbacks and pitchers and hitters and volleyball players were doing with their movements. We also were able to take force plates and see how, with wireless EMG, how muscles work to support those movements. And then obviously with nutrition and sleep, how to put the right things in the body for the individual to recover. Because on the elite level, an athlete that recovers in 2 days rather than 3, he plays, everybody else goes home. But the most important piece, and it sounds like you figured it out intuitively, is what's between your ears that makes the whole thing work. And it's a passion triangle. If you could visualize in your head, there's a triangle where passion is at the top, the low right is motivation, and the low left is commitment. So passion is a need state where your 90 trillion cells actually need to be doing what you are trying to accomplish. Motivation is task specific passion. I'm sure when you were learning how to climb mountains, they gave you ways to condition your arms, your legs. They told you what you'd be going through with altitude for your lungs. They gave you a toolkit, and you were motivated to try them all. And again, using your words, you were climbing mountains in your mind before you actually climbed them physically. And then the commitment is, if you've got passion and motivation and you're truly committed to getting better at what you're doing, every decision you make in life, both on and off the field, will be looked at through that competitive lens. So I actually have been involved in baseball for 50 plus years. And even today, every decision I make is looked at through a baseball or a football or hockey or whatever sport what I'm looking at is looked at through that lens. So it takes a little tunnel vision. It takes tunnel vision with an open mind, because unless you're willing to hear something new or try something new, it's that thing called the confirmation bias, where you only pay attention to things you already believe in and you don't get any better. So the sum total of all that, Mark, kind of is a window on what we're talking about right now. I'm 75 with Parkinson's, and I honestly believe we're doing better and more now than I did 25 years ago when I had youth and exuberance on my side.
That's interesting. I love those three pillars too. And for me, boy, I think there's a couple thoughts. There's no question. I wouldn't, you don't know my whole story, but there's no question that I would not be sitting here having this interview with you today if I didn't have, the passion and the purpose, to then get off that mountain because of the commitment that I put forth in terms of the training. I did 150,000 vertical feet in 3 months of climbing. To train and ramp up with this thing. But I find the main, and anybody listening to this should take note. And I'm not the guru of anything. I just know the difference of this formula that I've somehow or another figured out or applied to my life. The main differentiator between myself and somebody else. Now, not everybody can play in the NFL, but certainly a lot of people can go achieve, difficult. Anybody can go climb a mountain for the most part, or swim or things like that. And you don't have to be Olympic caliber to do these things. But the only difference between myself and many others is that third pillar that you just talked about, which is called commitment. And having that daily discipline to get out there and get after it, right? And again, not everybody has to do what I have to do, but if you have a goal in front of you, you're never going to get there if the roadmap, doesn't include the path of how to get there and then following that specifically. And that takes a lot of discipline. That's another arm and derivative of the word commitment, right? Is the discipline to actually execute that. So we all like to go out and we want to go see a movie, but between the food and the drink and all these other things that you put in your system, and then going back to that word called sleep and making sure that you do these things so you don't start cheating and on sleep, and that you can still get up at the crack of dawn and go take care of all these things. It's just amazing that that's the main thing that I see about people falling off the wagon or staying on.
Yeah, and it's basically looking at the cost benefit of a decision. Is it going to help you get better, or is it going to hold you back? And then the commitment to excellence, to where instead of going out with your buddies and having an extra 3 beers and half a pizza, you basically go back and get that extra 2 hours of sleep that you need to recover in the morning, so you can give it a much better effort in your preparation. So there's no easy way, but there's a way for every individual to organize this chaos. And the cool thing about today's world in performance, you can find a way, you can find a pathway in your chaos to help you be the best you can be. The hard part with today's world is that artificial intelligence is making things almost too easy. You mentioned earlier that the fact that you did your, I don't know how many thousand feet,
150,000.
150, that's a lot of feet.
Hmm.
And are you aware that kids today can get more knowledge off their cell phone than they can in a Bachelor of Science program at some liberal arts college?
Yeah.
And if you get the information given to you, if you haven't faced adversity, if you don't have an affiliation, if you don't have empathy, if you don't have all these social constructs to go with what you're after in life, it's not going to work out in the final analysis. So that's one of the reasons we're involved. We call it humanizing artificial intelligence,
Hmm.
and through Mustard, excuse me, Mustard and the companies that I work with, we're going to try to put everything that you've talked about in our conversation today. We want it to be a deliverable for free to the families that have a 12 or a 13-year-old male or female athlete who would normally stop playing sports by age 14, just have them play through high school, and they're better human beings and better equipped to handle this strange world that we're living in right now.
Yeah.
The sad thing is too many things are done for the kids. Too many parents are trying to make it easy when adversity and learning from failure is probably more important than being really good. Nobody cares that you were an all-star when you were 12 years old. It's quality of life when you're 23 years old.
Hmm.
So what you're talking about with your life and your pathway to be where you are right now is the perfect playbook for success of an individual in any occupation. Just take your process, alter it, and tailor it to theirs, and you don't look back. So that's these conversations. I hope the people that are listening to it will realize there's nothing magic. It's just identifying in your chaos what path you'd like to take and find a process. And you can learn about your process from Mark, from Tom, or find that individual that can mentor you.
Love it. It's called awareness,
Yeah,
becoming aware,
yeah.
socially aware. There's a lot of things in there. While we're on this word mustard, why don't you tell me a little bit more about that? And I mistook your hat for a Mariner hat because that they kind of had a logo like that way back in the
Yeah,
day
it's
in the
close.
70s, right?
Yes, you've got a good memory. So mustard is an idea that came about organically. We're sitting around. Anytime I do a consult, we do a teach and an information session before we instruct and head out to the field. So as it turned out, I was up at USC doing research and was actually their pitching coach for Trojan baseball. And during these lectures, we would talk on Mondays, we talk biomechanics. On Tuesday, we talk functional strength. On Wednesday, we talk nutrition and sleep. On Thursday, we talk mental emotional. And on Friday, we put it all together for strategies and tactics. And obviously, when an elite player comes in, it's a $30,000 weekend for the guys if they're going to do, the whole motion analysis and the force plates and the wireless EMG. And somebody said, I forget who it was, it might have been Billy Lee, who was a buddy of mine, long-term baseball, who played baseball way back, the spaceman. He said, I wonder how many Nolan Ryans go home from sports during high school because they just didn't stay with it long enough. So we said, you know what? I wonder if, let's do some research. And it turns out that, I know I'm getting long-winded here, I'll try to make it short. Hall of Famers, 90% of Hall of Famers were late bloomers.
Hmm.
So, but they found some way to stay with the sport until their tools actually matched up with the competitive environment they were in. So we started saying, how can we keep athletes in a sport longer? when they're preteen into their teenage years. And so it's called what we call the democratization of elite information. We wanted to be able to afford a family of 3 or 4 people that had, minors, pre-adolescents, give them the same information and instruction. And that's what Mustard is. You can take your cell phone, film your son in the backyard swinging a bat or throwing a ball, send it to the cloud, comes back to you, and it has the same efficacy as a $25,000 motion analysis. So with 140,000 pre-adolescent athletes out there, if we could just get half of them to play a little longer, then we've done our job. It's called the democratization of elite information and instruction.
I love that. I was a coach way back when with my girls, and I've got 2 girls. This is like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, volleyball and soccer and things like that.
Right.
And my whole goal was to play everybody. My whole goal was to get them to play, knowing that pretty much everybody's cap was going to be probably 8th grade, but maybe high school.
If
and
lucky.
So
yeah.
If they're lucky. And so my whole thing was just like, rather than be so competitive to win everything, which we actually did, we're going to play everybody, and we're going to make everybody feel included and empowered.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way that, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and you want to make sure to bring up those ones at the bottom to maximize their potential, but also give them the confidence, because you never know who could ultimately be that star.
Mark, what you just said is what we call sports and the power of play. And what you did intuitively, we've got research to back up everything you're talking about. And if you have everybody participating, they all have equal investment in the process, and they learn how to fail fast forward. They learn how to have empathy. They learn all the things that technology, the cell phones and the internet and social media don't provide. So I think sports is probably one of the last things available out there to humanize what we're going through as a world right now. And what you just talked about, you said all the right words, and intuitively you backed into it with common sense. What we've got is research and objective quantification, science-based across the board to support all of it.
Okay, so this Mustard, this isn't, just so I get this right, I understand what you just said about what it does, and this is an app that you go to the Android store or the Apple store or whatever, and you can download.
Yeah, just go to the App Store and you'll see Mustard, and then you download it. And if you have a cell phone or a tablet, you are now in the motion analysis business. And that leads, after motion analysis, it shoots them to functional strength, and that shoots them to mental emotional, and that shoots them to nutrition. So again, they come for one thing, mechanics, but they're going to get exactly the same thing that Tom Brady got 15 years ago when he first showed up at USC.
Well, look, I am going to go download this app because I need to get 1% better, just like Tom Brady.
I'll tell you what, I'll give you a couple of things that work as you get at 75. My mantra is just do something, never do nothing. So getting out of the bed in the morning is sometimes kind of tough, but getting out of bed is the beginning, and you never know where it's going to go from there.
So I call that FOF. You know what that means?
No, but I'll take a shot at it.
Go ahead.
No, I'm thinking bad words, and I don't want to use bad words.
No, it's good words.
We call GFF, go friggin' fast. What is FOF?
Feet on floor. So the first thing that needs to happen is the FOF, feet on floor.
I'm going to steal that from you and combine it with GFF. FOF, feet on floor, go friggin' fast.
I need to be part of Mustard, man.
Well, you're always welcome. This is kind of fun. I'll tell you what, you're very good at what you do. I'll hang out with you anytime.
Thank you. So I have one last question for you, and that is this. So you grew up as a baseball guy. You went to USC. You have this professional baseball career. You've been around Seaver and Nolan Ryan and all these other guys, Jamie Moyers, and you spent a heck of a lot of time as a coach in the professional ranks. And then kind of out of right field, here comes this football thing with Drew Brees, right? 10, 15 years ago, something like that, 20 years ago, probably. At the end of the day, in terms of coaching, have you found it more life fulfilling to be a mentor of football guys or a mentor of baseball guys? Or maybe it's a wash. Maybe it's the same.
I'll tell you what, the most fulfilling group, I love working with the superstars. It's actually very motivating. But I have the most feedback and feel most fulfilled when I'm hanging out with the peewees, the 9 to 12-year-olds. For some reason, my wife tells me it's because that's what I am. It's a 75-year-old, 12-year-old. But I get more feedback working with the pre-teenage than I do anybody else. But it's all been not just a wonderful run. It's been a lucky run. But as long as I'm alive, like we said earlier in this chit chat, I'm going to try to get better, both on and off the field, staying with technology. And the more you can hang out with people like yourself and kind of spread, you realize how many similar things we have going on in our brain. You could probably waltz into my environment and be just as good as an instructor as anybody that I know, because you've got a process that will work wherever you go.
Well, it certainly has been cross-sport, cross-business, transferable in that sense. So what I heard you say is it's not about football, or it's not about baseball, or really any other sport. It's about working with the youth of America.
Yeah, it's the individual.
Yeah.
And I think I said it, but I'll say it again. And remember, the Tom Brady's of the world, the Nolan Ryans of the world, they may be 35, 40-year-old athletes, but they're 12-year-olds at heart. And that's what's cool.
I think I might have a shot at 60 coming out of retirement. Maybe we have 3 more
Well,
plays.
I'm going to tell you what my wife said when I started talking about coming out of retirement. She said, "Why would you want to come back? You stunk the first time through."
Exactly. All right. So let me ask you this: where can people find you? We know that there's a Mustard app that people can download. Where can people find you if they want to get more information about the psychology and mechanics?
You can Google Mustard, go to teammustard.com.
Yep.
You can go to nationalpitching.com. You can go to 3DQB, or just Google my name and it'll chase you wherever you want to go. And remember, it's not just me. I've got some unbelievably talented and authentic people working with me that we're pushing the envelope. And my clock is ticking because I'm sneaking up on retirement age. But we're gonna go till as long as we can and as positive as we can until we can't do it anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what, I had to use all that process that I go through everything else to chase you down in my pyramid of success to actually get you on this podcast. So I greatly appreciate it. You've been a wealth of knowledge, super fun for me, just because I identify with so many things that you're talking about, this kind of being always the overachiever and having to work a process, or I wasn't going to play or do the other things that I've done. That's just the fact. And so inspiration to me. And this is the reason, again, why I do these types of podcasts.
Right back at you, Mark. Like I said, I hope this isn't the one and only. I'll be glad to hang out with you anytime. Stay in touch.
All right. Thanks so much.
Have a blessed day.
Well, hold on before you go.
Okay.
Everybody, that's been Tom House. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time.